quite special, as it's part of the program Novembre Numérique in French, a month dedicated to digital technologies that is carried out by the French Institute, so the month of November. Tonight we are really honored to welcome Maya Shekel and Daniel Landau, in French Landau.
Got it right.
Is it correct?
Yeah, perfect.
Thank you. Who will share with us their fascinating work on the identity and expressions in the Metaverse. I thank you again for your participation, and thank you all for attending this event. I wish you a very pleasant evening, and I will now leave the floor to Maya Shekel, pardon, en français, for a short presentation of the program Novembre Numérique. Emma, for you.
I won't be very long. The aim is just to tell you quickly what Novembre Numérique is. So it's all about, as Georges said, it's all about digital art. It's all about showing how innovation and technologies can really foster new formats and foster creativity. And as part of Novembre Numérique, we hosted last week, thanks to the Macor Foundation and Amit, who's here, a 4 days long workshop to support creative artists who work in the field of immersive realities. And as it happened, Maya was part of it with a VR project, so virtual reality project, that she will maybe decide to talk about, I don't know. And I just wanted to let you know that as part of this program, there's 2 other events that we are supporting. One is an exhibition in augmented reality of the work of the artist Orlan. She's a performer, and she's being exhibited at the Galerie Chelouche in Jaffa. And the other one is also an augmented reality exhibition that will open up next Tuesday at the Train Theatre in Jerusalem of the work of 2 French artists, Claire M and Adrien B. So yes, feel free to, it's all over our newsletter and all over our social media, so if you wish to also discover what we mean by immersive realities, virtual reality, augmented reality, sorry. And I now leave the floor to Maya.
Is my clicker? Yes, this is a pointer. Standing here? Yeah. As you want. Okay, so hi everyone, thanks for coming. I'm Maya Shekel, and I started working in the VR field around 2016 when I studied in Tel Aviv University my BA and MFA in digital media. When I started studying back then, people looked at me like I'm crazy, and I came to kind of talk about the end of the world, and no one knew what VR was or heard about it, and it took me a lot of time to convince people that it's not such a horrifying term. And thanks to Mark Zuckerberg, now I think everyone's here heard or even tried VR, right? Someone not hear about VR? No. Is there anyone that didn't try VR? Okay, interesting. Great. So if you heard or didn't hear about XR, XR is actually extended reality, and it's kind of I would say like a mega term that includes virtual reality, VR, which was what we're going to focus on today, augmented reality, which is maybe you've heard of Pokemon Go, or the option to see 3D elements on real life world, I would say, and mixed reality, which is way complicated, so we won't even talk about that today. But I will dive into virtual reality, which is always a VR headset that we put on our heads, and it changes the reality as we see it. So it's a 3D environment that surrounds us. We don't see real life anymore, and it's usually 3D elements. I won't go into people here are more experts in VR to 6 stuff or 3 stuff, but the idea is that your whole surrounding changes. One of the very strong things in VR is presence. The feeling of being there, of being somewhere else, and not being in my physical reality where I put on the glasses. So this is a very short and silly example, which I'm going to show. Works. Of a football team trying to walk on a plank. This is one of the most popular VR experiences. You put on the VR headset. You look like as if you're on the roof of a skyscraper. You're walking on a plank. And you could see how much these football players are terrified. It's a whole like 15-minute video of them just freaking out and feeling that they're walking and might die. This is because of presence. We really feel that we're in a different reality. We really feel that we're somewhere else. And that's also one of the biggest trends in VR. Presence also works psychologically, perceptually, and cognitive, and makes us feel very immersed in these experiences. So I will continue with a few things here. So as I said, virtual reality has a very, very strong ability to actually mimic reality, mimic things that we're used to seeing. But it also has an option to enhance reality. So if you've heard of the Metaverse, which I'm sure you did, but I'm not really going to go too much into the Metaverse, then the Metaverse actually mimics regular interactions. I could put on the VR headset, which is something I did, and my sister that lives in New York put on her VR headset, and we both went on to this app called Horizon Venues, and we went together to watch an Adele concert. When I lifted my right arm, my avatar lifted their right arm. When I lifted my left arm, my avatar lifted my left arm. I could speak freely to my sister. And we went together to see an Adele concert right up in front. And of course, that's not something we would be able to do in reality when we live 12 hours plane flight from each other. But the virtual reality and Metaverse made that happen. So we do have the ability also to mimic reality and also to enhance reality. In the last 2 years, I've been working at the Advanced Reality Lab at Tel Aviv University. It used to be IBC, if anyone heard of it. And there we don't work in the Metaverse. And if we would think about a Metaverse as kind of a social platform, there's a few platforms today. No one really knows what's going on. And we're developing apps there that are more, you don't have to communicate with someone else on the other side. You communicate with avatars. And that's our specialty. So as it says here, I will read it out. We focus on human interactions and conversational design with virtual characters in VR. We study deeply the effects of virtual characters on individuals and society. And we develop various applications that operate today in multiple fields. So I'm going to show you a few projects I've been working on in the Advanced Reality Lab, and I've been leading them. And today they're actually real-life applications that we've sold also to the Ministry of Defense, the hospitals, and we've been working on a lot of apps. All this is not the Metaverse. The Metaverse is, as I said, a social platform. Today there's a few apps of the Metaverse. There's no one place that everyone goes and meets that you guys aren't part of, so don't have any FOMO yet. But we're actually developing individual apps for people to interact. So when we're talking about virtual characters, I divide it into myself, which means who am I in this virtual experience? Do I have a body? Do I have a role? What can I do or what can I not do? Because as I said, we have the option to enhance the ability also of ourselves in VR. And who is the other? Who is in front of me? How does he look? How does he move? How do we interact? And can I talk to him freely? Because now we're talking about real avatars, not people that, not my sister in New York that put on her glasses and met me in the Metaverse, but just a regular avatar with no one representing it on the other side. So this is a short example I did for Juanita Youssef's PhD. She's someone that works at the Advanced Reality Lab. And she wanted to do research about ageism, which is racism against elderly people. And she wanted to show, she wanted the participant one time to be in a positive adult and one time to be in a negative adult. So as you see right here, one time I could be Einstein, and when I look at my real hands, I actually see his hands, and when I look at the mirror and tilt my head, then Einstein is moving his head. And one time I could be Nostrada. So this is an example that we were working on in the lab. This is called embodiment. I actually substitute my real body into a substitute body, full scale, so it really does feel that I am them. Now we have a few things. When I'm talking about the other, this is another project that we've done. This project was actually made with the Dean of Psychology in Tel University. And we made an avatar, a suicidal avatar. He's depressed, He has suicidal thoughts, and the job of the person going into this VR experience is it's for psychologists, and it's how to train to give them a suicidal prevention plan, which is a plan that a lot of psychologists use. And in this simulation, the psychologists put on their headsets and they sit in front of the depressed avatar, and they speak to them freely and try to understand how they could also, how could they see that he's in need, and also how to prevent it. So this is a short example. You will see me in all the videos. Sound working? How are you? So what we did in the lab, we actually made an AI avatar. This avatar, we speak to them freely. We ask them how they're feeling. They tell us that they're not feeling so well, and then we, as a psychologist, I'm of course not a psychologist, I would start to ask, okay, are there any things that you do with yourself that make you feel better? Is there anyone you could call when you feel these feelings? And I actually start going through the prevention plan, and we really made this AI-based character that today has been sold already for 3 different institutes that have been actually training their workers how to prevent suicidal.
Okay, because it's with the questions you mean, or how does it work? So you said you sold it to 3 different institutes.
Yes.
When you say you sold it, the people they can train.
They have their own app now.
Okay.
So also a very big benefit of VR. That's a good question. A very big benefit of VR is that if we have this script written, so now it's an he has main answers that he would answer all the time. But what happens is, if now I had to do like an adaptation for the Ministry of Defense that wanted their own version, then very easily we could put him in soldier uniform and have his answers be more specific to his job. So that's a very big benefit of virtual reality in comparison to role-playing with actors, which is something that a lot of hospitals do today, and of course the military. So yeah, we actually sold a different version of the app for each institution that needed to train, if it's the commanders, if it's the healthcare workers, or the psychologists, how to prevent suicide. Let's see, any solar. So another example that works on exactly the same platform we've been operating in the lab is Tama. Tama, I don't know if any of you have been in the Tel Aviv Museum of Arts lately, but she's sitting in the new entrance of the museum. And they've done an exhibition called One of a Kinds, and they wanted a way to make the terms of NFT, blockchain, Bitcoin, more accessible to the public. Because in the museum, you don't know who will come there. If it's our grandparents, if it's children, if it's techies, we really just don't know. And they said, instead of reading again about NFT, we want the visitors to come and have the option just to speak freely and ask all the questions that they don't dare to ask because they're too embarrassed. And that's why they wanted us to make Tama. And Tama is a virtual avatar as well. This time she's on iPads, but we also had a VR version. And any visitor that came could ask Tama whatever they wanted about NFT and have a free conversation. If they would ask, okay, do you like watermelons, Tama? Then she wouldn't know to say, no, I like peaches, but she would know to say, I don't think that's relevant to NFT, and bring back the conversation to where she wanted. Tama was actually very interesting because we had 3 big conflicts about her. First of all, the design of Tama. There was a lot of negotiation if she should be a man or a female, male or female, because apparently it's a big question, why are Siri and Alexa women, and should Tama also be a woman, or should she actually be a man? And you could just think how much that had to talk about with the museum. But also what was interesting was, how does Tama need to look? Should she be futuristic because she's talking about NFT, or should she be like the girl next door so it feels more accessible? So there were a lot of different thoughts. And also, as I said, since we don't know who our visitors are, we had to make a very big bank of answers that she'll have, so she could really answer also the most techie people, but also not the techie people. So that was a very interesting process. And what was even more interesting is that whoever speaks to Tama, this is also a secret, we see what people are talking to her. We don't hear their voice, we just see it text-wise. We also don't, of course, know who spoke to her. what's interesting is how people feel with her. And people ask her out on dates, and they ask her to marry, and what's her phone number. And of course, we knew that people would ask that because we did a lot of user testing, so we did have answers for a lot of things. But it's very interesting to see what it brings out from people when they meet this virtual character that's a little nice to them. And the last project I'm going to talk about, which Emma started saying, I'm working on. Yes?
Can I ask a question?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So on the last project,
yes.
Do you also adapt the facial expressions of the answer to the answer that you don't know what it's going to be? Because the answer is based on AI, I understand.
So it's not GPT-3, she doesn't generate answers live, but she does she's AI because she keeps getting smarter the more people speak to her. She knows how to make her answer more precise to the questions that they ask her, but she doesn't make up new answers on the fly, which I'm also going to talk about in a second when I'm going to talk about the different decisions we need to make in this process.
And then you interpret the feeling of the answer?
So each answer, each predefined answer has also, of course, animations related. What?
Nothing.
So there are no real-time answers that she answers.
But in the case that there are, would you be able to adapt the expression?
That's a big question that I don't know the answer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, I mean that's like GPT-3 already, and thinking of how she would generate her answers live and take the animations. I'm sure there's a lot of startups working on that, to be honest.
But sorry, is this virtual reality or it's different?
No, so it's all in virtual reality. So what I showed you, there's also an iPad version in the museum, but there was also the VR for the first week.
Okay.
Yeah.
But like AI can be with like...
AI could be not in virtual reality.
Yeah, exactly.
Or in virtual reality, but our expertise and focus right now is on smart virtual characters, which is something that not a lot of people are doing yet, so this is kind of sneak peek. So the last project I'm going to present also shows how we could have our embodiment and also make the other. So this is a project I'm working with on the Makor Phil Foundation, what Emma was saying before. It's absolutely work in progress, but this is a project where you play a monster. When you look at your hands, you're this big blue monster, and in front of you is Ron. He's 8 years old, hard of hearing, and you need to interact with sign language. So this is another way of interacting that's not only by speech, but also by signing. Once you sign correctly to what he was expecting, then the game goes on. And I'm going to show very quickly this. I don't know how long I have. So in this very primary work of progress project, you can see that I also have representation for myself. I also have hands. And there's also the other in front of me. And we react to each other. So he won't be satisfied till I do the right signing. Right now he's afraid. He saw the monster. It's very dark, I see. And he'll thumbs up. And only when you see that I've put my thumbs up too, then he'll go to his next animation. So we're really, it really gives you a feel that you're interacting in sign language, which is something that you could really learn and do in VR, which is kind of amazing to get feedback without having to be dependent on another person. I'm not sure everything, but that's really an example that you could also be represented. That you could also be represented and interact with others. Do I have how much time for that? Okay. So I am going to talk a little bit, just because I started saying about the process. So also, of course, when I start designing a VR experience, then I would think, should this be cartoonic or should this be realistic? There's a lot of options when we decide, but it really depends on the experience. Of course, I won't put a suicidal patient as a cartoonic patient, because I want it to be very realistic and kind of imitate real life, so the psychologist will have the best training. But if I'm doing an interactive storytelling story for not only kids but also, then cartoonic could be one of my decisions. And of course, the animation, just like we know from real film animations, if I want the movement to be very realistic and it's something that's very important for me, I might use motion capture just like they use in film, and I might use ready-made animations from the internet and that work with the different game engines. So a lot of decisions also in the design ones. Another decision is sound. So that was kind of, it's not exactly what you asked before, but when we were working on Tama, the woman in the museum, if you remember, they wanted her in English, Arabic, and Hebrew. So not only is it hard to do AI, it's almost impossible in Hebrew and Arabic, and also the training. We had to train her to be smarter and to train her in 3 languages. I won't tell you how much time we had for this project. It was very, like, almost impossible. So we took one actress that spoke 3 of the languages, Mira Awad, and she recorded all the answers of Tama. Of course, there's a lot of ways to do text-to-speech, where you write the text and then you would hear an automated sound, but it was very important for us that Tama will have a realistic sound. And also, there's not a lot of good text-to-speech engines in Hebrew or Arabic, so that was kind of how we decided to go on the recording process. And what was interesting is that once we started using Tama in the museum, then we saw that there's a few questions that we don't have, like the answers for, and we wanted to add them. But Mira moved to London, and now to call Mira and ask her to send us a recording. So these are decisions that we made in the process that they all have flaws, but they also have a lot of advantages. Like the fact that Tama sounds like a real person is a very big advantage. But on the other hand, when we wanted to add answers, then we got in a problem. So that's just a few other things to think about when we're working on this process. And of course, the most important thing that we do is we user test a lot. Once we make a script, we go and we check it and we iterate and we see that we have enough answers. I didn't say it, but the suicidal project that we've done, it was tested on over 150 people. We wrote a whole research about it. So they did it also in VR and also in role-playing, and we actually achieved results that showed that they were equal in their effect. So it was very interesting, and we have a lot of database to know that we have enough answers that in no part in the simulation he by accidentally answered the same answer twice, or something is missing. And that's it. So I hope I kind of gave you the feeling that virtual reality isn't only a very scary and unfamiliar platform. I truly believe that we could do positive things with it, and of course make us be better in our physical world. And that's it.
You can stay for the question. Yes. And we'll have a question and debate after. Okay. So please, first.
May I know if these projects, are they in use now, or they are just kind of research projects?
So as I said, the training project is in use on 3 different institutions. Tama is in Tel Aviv Museum of Arts.
Yeah.
And the last project I showed with the sign language is still work in progress, but I really hope it will be used. Yes.
Same, because I come from the physics background, so we were here when we talk about the AI and everything about coding.
Yes.
So the project that you are talking about, seems that the day-to-day job is not coding. Could you maybe describe a bit?
Yes, of course. So I did work with a developer on most of the projects here, but I do have to admit that virtual reality has 2 main game engines. One is Unity and one is Unreal. And it is very easy without coding to get very good experiences. So like the last experience you saw with the sign language, there was no coding that I did. It's like out of the box, things that Oculus give you. So there's a lot of things that you could do without coding. So of course AI and the more complicated projects that we did use a developer from the lab. But still, it's not like, if we would do more developed AI, then of course we would have to work with developers, like AI developers.
It's more interesting to know the part, not coding part.
Yeah. So it was really mainly to show that it could be in a lot of different fields.
Yeah, and can be democratized the same.
Completely.
During the design options that you showed, is deepfake also an option?
So we use for our project. I mean, yes, we have seen deepfake also in VR, but there's a lot of very, very good apps that we use. Let's say iClone, which is just another application where you could put in a photo of a person. You could like change it, customize it to look more like how you want, like you saw with Einstein and Nasrallah, and text, of course, in there, and motion, and so yeah, we do a lot. Like the Nasrallah and Einstein is perfect. Any other questions? Yes.
And the monster and the kid.
Yes.
You were the monster.
Yes.
The kids, I mean, you program the program that you would do exactly as the kid asked, and then you could continue with the program. Can we make it the opposite way around, that the avatar will have to relate to real life, starting from movements, ending with face recognition, all kinds of voice recognition, that he can actually correlate to real life and build his own intelligence out of it?
What do you mean? Like, just give me an example so I understand.
That there is a full section of voice recognition.
Right.
That you can listen to a voice and you know the person is depressed, for example. Can this figure listen to the voice and actually act with a human?
Yes, so that's, if I understand correctly, that's what's happening. So we have a big database of gestures, and there's also, in the gesture, I could do almost the gesture, or like be almost mistaken, and the kid in the other avatar knows if I've done it right or haven't done it right and responds correctly. Right now he doesn't know how to fix, like tell me, no, you didn't do it right, but he won't go on with the show if I didn't do it right, and maybe he'll be frustrated, like he'll have all kinds of different branches of animation if I didn't do the gesture correctly. So it does work like speech recognition, just gesture recognition. That answers.
You are deciding on what you want to work, or you get feedback from people who say we really are interested in suicidal or in gesture?
So the suicidal project started from the Dean of Psychology, that she wanted to make prevention plans more accessible, okay, and have the opportunity for psychologists to train whenever and however they want on practicing how to speak to a suicidal patient. So that, for example, came from her, but once we made that app, then we got all kind of different inquiries and we started making more apps. So yeah, I kind of, like, Tel Aviv Museum of Arts approached us, but then I would decide if I want to take this project or not. The last project is completely just from the side without the advanced reality. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Time we have? Plenty.
Yeah, plenty.
Brad is staying in line. Nobody wants to say it, but everybody hates it. Yes. We can just open the screen, that's what it is. We're peers.
Want to let the game in the Metaverse. So, good evening, everybody. I'm Daniel Landau. Thanks so much for coming. Thank you, Maya, for your presentation. Fascinating work. Our paths have been, we met and crossed in the past. So basically, my background is media arts. Most of my life, for my first 2 degrees in the arts, exploring technology and the question, the challenge of the technology impacting our body and society. So kind of the personal aspect of how technology impacts us, and of course the societal one is really the core of my research. Now, around the same year, 2016, indeed, a new technology came into our hands as artists and industry, and my work started to split. So I continued to do a lot of experimentation in the art field, but also Israel startup, started knocking on the doors and saying, oh, here's a new platform, what can we do with it? In a way, in brackets, I'll say, for many years, VR is a hammer looking for a nail. And then I started kind of my entrepreneurial work with very interesting startups. I'm not going to be talking about them today. Fascinating explorations, trying out, storytelling, realizing what kind of limitations, and understanding that users are not so quickly ready to adopt a device in their lives. There's many interesting reasons why not. But at the same time, when I was exploring what could you do with VR, indeed, learning with my work in academia, and again, Reichman University is where I started as well, realizing that VR is a behavioral lab. Really, it's a fantastic tool to bring the world into the laboratory. So if you think about it in psychology or all behavioral sciences, if you want to study a behavior and interaction, it's very, very difficult to do it in a natural way. Now, if VR, and it's great that Maya gave us a little background, VR simulates the world, and you can bring a social interaction, and there's another term, so you have presence, I am here, but there is also this term called social co-presence, which is basically an extension saying, I feel myself in the space, and I feel that I'm there together with someone, and that's very, very special. Why did you come out of your houses to be here? I mean, of course we're fed up with Zoom, but I'm sure some of you have larger screens, smaller screens, but there's something about being with other people that is very, very special. I mean, it's a very kind of basic notion, but that also occurs in VR. And then I was seduced into doing academic research, culminating in a PhD in Helsinki Media Lab. And I'm going to talk about some of that research and fusing it with some of the art projects. But I think also what I would like from the takeaway of this talk, which is very short, is a little bit of a philosophical perspective. Because, if people try to kind of answer the question, what is the metaverse? First of all, there's no simple answer because it's not yet established. And there's, of course, one big company trying to, control it. But there's actually a lot of other initiatives, commercial, exploratory, open source, trying to understand what it means. And in my opinion, it's basically, it's a place. Obviously, it's virtual. And I think that it's more about how much time we spend in it. Because in a way, I sometimes kind of argue a little bit, kind of for argument's sake. I say, we're already in a metaverse. How many hours in your day are you behind a screen? Where, the reality is mediated. So it will be, your workspace, your communications. Again, a lot of us at work do most of the day Zoom, even post-COVID. But just add to that component kind of the spatial aspect. And the difference between Zoom and metaverse meetings is that I could really relate to body language of people around me. And that's, again, super significant. So it's this kind of opportunity to simulate the world, to augment it, as Maya said. And I think what I'm going to be talking about today is really focusing on virtual embodiment. And again, a virtual embodiment is a subset of virtual reality. So virtual reality is being somewhere else. And virtual embodiment, and that's really the core of my research, is being someone else. So if in virtual reality we can be somewhere, but also be someone else, what would that mean for our relationships? Okay, because most of the platforms, you build your avatar. So you create one with a beard, you with the eyeglasses, and everyone would kind of try to build his cool avatar, younger, stronger, I don't know, but that's kind of the automatic process. Let's create us in the metaverse, or what if? And this is completely in line with modern gender conversation. I can identify myself as whoever, whatever I want to be. Male, female, color, skin, race, age, style, and that brings a lot of conversation about what does it mean to have a self. Okay, so this is a preview of the talk. That's the takeaway, to leave this talk and kind of think about what would our identities / relationships look like when the basic aspect of our identity, who we are, is fluid. Okay? So that's the lecture in a nutshell, but let's see how I will take you through this part. So first of all, the relationship between body, self, and other. That's a very kind of interesting relationship. Where does empathy come into the picture? Super interesting concept or construct, empathy. The relationship between technology and self, it's not something new. It's from Narcissus to Metaverse. It's a kind of a continuum of how technology impacts the construct of self. Some of my research projects and maybe future applications. Okay, are you ready? Let's go. So what does it mean to have a body? It sounds something that very trivial, but science and research kind of define it into 3 parameters. Quite interestingly enough, we can assess that against people which have kind of a pathology that don't have that. So first of all, self-location. I know where this hand is. Now just a little bit of neuroscience. Since all our perception is in a black box, it's not so trivial to see something, to feel something, and to know where it is. That's a lot of feedback loop. Okay? But typically, we know where our body is. There's a nice trick you can do tonight in bed. Lie down for 5 minutes without moving. And of course, you remember that you put your hand next to your left hand next to your body. But after 5 minutes without looking at it, try to assess how many centimeters is the hand away from your body. You will not know. Why? Because when you don't move, you don't get touch. You don't get the motor system understanding where the hand is. It will disappear. And we have occasionally these feelings when the leg is numb, and that's a different one because you don't have sensation. And so they're very important. To have a body means you know where it is, tell it what to do. Well, there's a few pathologies, I won't mention them, that basically you feel the hand, you can touch it, you can see it, but you can't tell it what to do. And just a sense that it's mine. Okay? You feel that it's mine. Again, very subjective, but again, there's other pathologies that you can move it, you can see it, you can relate to it, but it doesn't feel yours. Okay? So that's what it means to have a body. What does it mean to have a self? I'm not a psychologist, but a researcher. I dived in to understand what a self means. What does it mean to be a self, to have a self? And the conclusion, after really a lot of literature, there is no consensus what that means. Buddhists say there is no self. Neuroscience talk about the cognitive self. There's self-image. Is it my body? Is it my narrative? So there's this kind of cloud of ideas what a self is, but there is no consensus. But my conclusion from that a self is not a thing. It's more of let's call it a process. It's not a thing. It's really some models, some constructs, and it's very fluid. And as you'll see soon, you'll see that even the physical aspect of our self is something that can change. Now, if I touched upon very, very briefly and very quickly about what does it mean to have self, is it me, is it my stories, is it my histories, is it my body, what about the other? So Sartre talks a lot about, the other, and he famously claimed, that hell is the other. The person in front of me, I have no clue what's going in his consciousness. It's the biggest gap that we can experience. Here's a consciousness, I'm a consciousness, but we have no bridge to know what goes inside. You can say things, but you can think things. I can see you do things, but I don't know what your motivations are. So of course, there's a lot of kind of social psychology trying to understand people, behaviors, teams, and groups. But ultimately, there is this kind of invisible gap that is unbridgeable. So, but then, there's a very interesting construct called empathy. And empathy is a little challenges this idea that this unbridgeable gap. Empathy is basically, and there's kind of 3 steps of kind of relationship between others, like sympathy, empathy, and compassion, but I'll focus on empathy. Empathy is actually, and it is scientifically proven, feeling what another person feels. It could be emotional. If someone's sad in front of you and you care for him or her, you will feel that sadness. But also physically. Many times, and again, well studied, if you view someone having his hand severed, you will really have your stomach kind of feel it in the stomach. What does that mean? I mean, you're feeling something that didn't happen to you. It could be very visceral, could be very, very strong. Now, but this is a black box. It didn't get any input, didn't get any stimulation. It's just from viewing this person in front of you. And of course, there's tons of biological reasons and evolutionary ones why caring makes sense. Of course, mammals live in various types of groups, and it makes a lot of sense. But it's a very interesting construct. Now, there was a lot of people claiming that VR is the ultimate empathy machine because I can be in the body of others. I can see the world from a different perspective. We studied that. We did many, many studies. I'm a techno-skeptic, so I always reject this and this is a magical machine, this is going to be the solution for, this will solve the problems. I mean, basically, let's put in my take on Western society and technology. Basically, the complex relationship of humans and technology is our nature is technological. We create technology to solve problems and to optimize, but we do create problems with every step. We create problems, we try to solve them, creating more problems. So I reject the fact that VR is a magic machine for empathy, but it's a very interesting playground to explore empathy and perhaps to do interesting applications that, when carefully constructed, can really improve because it's a behavioral lab. Because I can do it in a controlled and repeatable and measured and well designed to improve behavior. Okay, so that's empathy. So, and of course, this is the famous Chris Milk. He's kind of a VR pioneer. So I'm just putting a little question mark on his claim. Any questions, by the way? You can be very informal and ask.
Why do you think you will feel more empathy? Why do you feel you will feel more empathy if you have a mask? Like, for example, I don't think that even if you put your body in the body of with the mask as a woman, that you will feel as a woman. And also, I don't have the feeling that with VR you will have more feelings than what you can have in reality.
So first of all,
I think this is the opposite for me. Like, entering in a world where you have this type of device, you will become like, already with social media and all these things, will become more lonely. And I think that with this type of device, you will be even more lonely than what you were before, and you will feel less empathy than when you felt before.
So it's a fantastic question. Let's take a few minutes just to relate, because this is the core of what we want to talk about today. Is it technology for good, or is it taking us into more challenges? So first of all, that's exactly what I say. Putting you in a different body will not automatically increase empathy. But we did study it carefully. And I'll give you an example of a training kind of application and program in Barcelona with, I call him my intellectual grandfather, Mel Slater, very famous VR researcher, which I hope to get to talk about his project. But I'll tell you about the training. So, for domestic violent men in Barcelona, they've devised an interaction, an experience where the male offender is embodied. So, I didn't get to that, but I think you can bear with me. He is in a virtual body with the 3 terms. He tells the hand to move, it moves, as you saw in Maya's examples. The hand moves. You can see the hand, and that creates the illusion of a body. So that offender is in the body of a woman experiencing aggression by a man. It has been run as an experiment showing this completely modified behavior and create a very positive empathetic response to these offenders. Very particular, very short, very accurate, very well studied, with a lot of iterations to make it work. And it did. Now the question, if I will be in a virtual world with myself as other characters and spend time with the avatars, will it make me lonely? Not necessarily yes, and not necessarily no. It's about us to design the metaverse in such a way that the current startups, and again, I didn't mention it, and now I'm a CEO of a startup, so for me to do either research, art, or industry kind of innovation, it's all modes of operating, and your question is really an important responsibility we need to take. Okay? So it's not automatically, not bad or good, it's really how we design that. that world. Yes?
I don't really understand well. So your research project is about understanding the use of AI and
no AI. I didn't mention one time AI.
Embodiment of the virtual reality to the psychology.
Exactly.
So it is a branch of psychology.
Very psychological.
So then the question is study more at the individual level or a bunch of people. Because as far as I'm not socialist, but as far as I know, that to study the behavior of the society is different from to study the behavior of the individual.
Absolutely. But as I hope I'll reach that place, I'll kind of grow kind of quick. My work has circles, like one-on-one empathy, in-group, out-group. That's already attitude towards a group, which is my group, or attitudes against an outgroup. I'll reach that, and maybe you'll see how this research goes from individual to collective. Okay, I'll skip this just to mention that the history of self and technology is ancient long. And what I like about Greek mythology is that many times they kind of understand the hubris, the kind of the core of kind of the DNA of the problem. So Narcissus, he looks into himself, and that self basically is lethal and he dies. And all these technologies who actually reproduce an image of yourself kind of bring me to a lot of my research of being embodied and modifying yourself. So of course, we have from the lake to reflective objects, the first photography, and of course, when Instagram or smartphones came into place, we could take images of ourselves. But where is VR in this line? So this is what we were talking about: virtual embodiment. With you track your motion, you can be whoever you want. It's based on a very famous experiment without technology that a rubber hand can feel your own. If you were curious, make a note for yourself in YouTube, rubber hand. Very nice experiment that the rubber hand is receiving touch input at the same time as the rubber hand is there. And again, the three elements of this being my body are applied. I see it, I feel it, it's mine. Very nice way to understand how virtual embodiment works. Lanier is the first one who embodied himself in the body of a lobster. I'll skip the literature review. I'll just take one project of Mel Slater, and he did an experiment. Look at the right one on the top. He did an experiment to conditions. Drumming lesson. First group were embodied. And again, think about it. It's not seeing virtual people. It's I am sitting behind a drum. I look at myself. Condition 1. Rasta, cool clothes and dark skin. Group 2. Official dress, white screen, skin. Again, both learning a sequence of drumming. Now, who do you think learned rhythm better and had better groove? Unbelievable. Yes. Yes. If you are embodied in a cool avatar with cool clothes and dark skin, there's an effect called the Proteus effect, that we assimilate what we think about a person's qualities, and when we are embodied, we take these qualities literally. And this is so well measured because you can measure the beats and see how quickly they learn from a big sample. It's fascinating. And he has a ton of these projects. He really did probably every idea that you can imagine, and now we're kind of taking it into more specific fields. Any question here? How much time do we have? 10 minutes? 5 minutes? 15? Well, that's plenty of time to go into actual projects and see what I've done in my field. So, question, my first question was like my overall, can virtual embodiment kind of blur the gap between self and other? But if I can be another body, and the body is almost the last aspect of identity that we thought that is solid. First of all, again, in modern gender reality, people modify their body, and again, you want to be related. I have a cousin who is non-binary, trans-musk. I can't follow it, you know, but we know that that's a reality. It's legit to be related to whatever you want. But this comes to the body level. You can, in virtual reality, move around, and that body could have a tail, could be purple, could be extended to whatever you want. And the second one is what the impact on a societal level. First experiment, I just wanted to explore empathy. And we put a person in front of a filmed virtual reality person telling a real story, a real painful story. So there's a few techniques in VR. You can either model, as Maya does, but you can also film in a very immersive way with a stereoscopic lens, that you actually see real people, but they are experienced in a virtual space. So I filmed a real person telling a real story, a very painful one, and we just compared viewing it on a 2D screen or in virtual reality. The impact, because a lot of the question is, you know, what's the difference between VR and regular screen? By far, the impact of being in VR was producing far more physiological response. So we really were able to measure mimicry of the face. So she cried, there was the viewer, his facial expressions were mimicking, and that's a very powerful measure to know that empathy is induced.
How can you explain this difference?
Because you feel, when you look at the screen, it's just a picture on the wall. But when you are in VR, you get the sense that you're there, and that person's in front of you. We like to kind of speculate why social co-present works. First of all, this thing called interpersonal distance. Again, it's something we do every day. Your kid comes in home, you hug it, you're closer in 20 centimeters. That's there's these kind of official zones. 20 centimeters distance is intimate. 80 is friendly distance. 2 meters is kind of a social distance, and 3 meters is public. But you feel that in VR, and I've done a couple of studies about interpersonal distance. And the kind of reflection is that if you're next to someone in the relationship of empathy, and if you feel his pain, you almost want to put your hand on him because he's there. And that potential for touch, because when someone is in distress in front of you, you know, a normal or a typical response would be, you know, to touch, put a hand on the hand, or to hug. So we proved that in the lab. And to answer your question, in very particular conditions, it did induce empathy. Yeah.
So basically, you're talking it's like a particular case, because when we talk about VR, usually you are always passing through an avatar, which is not a real person.
Could be.
So here you're talking about the surrounding being 3D, but the person is the real person.
But he's reproduced in the headset in a VR manner. I don't want to go too much into details, but we can.
It's a real person that you film, or
yes,
it's an avatar?
A real person, but I film with a special camera. And in the headset, I can move my head, and I am in the room. It's true, it's not an avatar, it cannot be interactive, but it does apply as VR, because I can move my head in that room and I feel that he's there.
So but basically it's like putting somebody, like you zoom in 3D.
Exactly.
But it's still the real person that
you
interact with.
It's a real person. And there's an entire field of VR which is video-based. Okay? So I proved that it does induce empathy. And of course I talked about the facial synchronous. Moving from extremely personal to a political scenario. That actually was my first project. Again, film. The projects here I'm going to show is our film ones, but again, film with a special camera. I wanted to create a scenario with a term of perspective taking. So I did a checkpoint scenario. 2 soldiers waiting, getting kind of a warning that there might be a suicide bomber. They're very, very alert. They're stuck in the checkpoint. other perspective, two Palestinians, pregnant woman, she has a pregnancy in risk, she must go to hospital urgently, so there's high stakes for them as well. So we get the background story for each group, everyone is very alert, very tense, and we created 3 perspectives. One is that you see the scenario from the perspective of the soldiers, obviously from the perspective of the Palestinians, and then a third control group seeing it from a neutral. And I wanted to see if this scenario can induce empathetic attitudes towards the outgroup. Now, we ran it in college, in the university, where mostly were Israeli youngsters with the age between 25 and 35. So it's checking the impact of this scenario on the in-group. Okay, or at least let's see what their response to the in-group or the out-group. And we got very, very significant results. When we put the young Israelis, some of them did the military, some didn't, but the Israelis, in the perspective of the soldiers, so they saw the suffering of the Palestinians. No empathetic response. This did not increase any empathy. By the way, it's so interesting for documentarists. You know, for documentary, they want to change and improve and have kind of impact. But there was no effect.
But did they know that the situation of the...
Yes, full scenario. They tell them to stop, they come closer, and the Palestinian reaches out to show a letter.
No, I mean, did they know that she's like pregnant, that they were absolutely...
They know, the Palestinian says she had, but there's, of course, you know, every story has its own perspective. They are afraid that there's a suicide bomber, so this could be a bomb.
But they knew.
They knew.
Okay.
It's a very simple story. I just want to say the results and then I'll take questions. But for 90%, it's crazily impactful for Israelis. Seeing the Israeli as an aggressor, seeing myself as an aggressor, created tremendous behavior modification. They became more empathetic to the other side. So to answer your question, where does this research will this solve the Palestinian-Israeli conflict? Obviously not. It's lab, it's controlled, but it makes you think. You learn a lot about yourself, and by the way, it really supports also the domestic violence study. When you see yourself in kind of a very weak and violent behavior, that's a reflection, and this relates to the history of seeing ourselves. But here, it's not only seeing yourself in the lake or on the mirror or a video, you feel yourself. You feel. Imagine seeing yourself, and I have a project where you meet yourself. I'll hope to get to it. Very impactful. Let's have someone else here wanted to ask. Yeah.
Like in this case, what's the difference between doing it with like regular video, like over the shoulder, like
sense of presence. Sense of presence. When you have a close-up, you sit in your living room, you watch whatever you want. There's a close-up. Nice, very nice, interesting technique, cinematic technique to see the old lady opening her mint, and it's funny, or she's about to shoot something. In VR, there is no close-up. It's as if that lady is coming towards you and opening it in front of you because it's almost physical reality. So being there is very experiencing this scenario in VR is almost as like being there, as opposed to just seeing it as a kind of third-person screen experience. Yeah.
What would be very interesting, and I don't know if you did it yet or not yet, and if this is a project that you want to do, would be to do this experiment in Arabic university or also in a European university, and to see if they fulfill, even if they are Arabs and they feel closer to the Palestinians, even if you put them in the body of a soldier, Israeli soldier, they will feel closer to the soldier. And if this is yes, I will tell you that we can feel empathy with your VR.
Super interesting. I have a project that I did do perspective taking with an Arab family, which was an art project. Let's move on to the next project.
what are the rational perspectives?
It's just control, just to show that when you are in no perspective, there is no effect. And that really makes the effect of you know, the Palestinian perspective much more stronger. You did not get any effect in the neutral.
That's a video.
That's more like a video, because you're kind of removed and not within the scene. So I talked about the findings. I'll go quickly on this project. This is also one of my first virtual embodiment experiments. I embodied a person. This is kind of relates to the rubber hand experiment. So you sit on a table, you put your hands, and you actually see yourself grow older. So the first time you're a 7-year-old, second chapter you are 25, and then you're an 8-year-old. And I wanted to see how that impacted fear of getting older. Okay, but I got very interesting results. I experimented a lot here. There was narrative layer, and I had all kind of interesting things going on there. But first of all, I proved that my technique creates the illusion of being in a different body. That's in science you have to prove a technique. So that was a very important thing. It changed people's time perception. It's a known fact in science that older people perceive time to pass longer. Okay? Sorry, slower. So this effect was being measured. But also, I'll go quickly to the next project, because that's really one that relates to what you are asking. But this project was the way for me to prove that we can actually induce the sense of being in a different body. An art project. Israel Museum, I was invited to create a project about self and others, so perfectly I said, fine, I want to participate. And a very simple project. So it starts with a personal story. Give me 3 minutes notice, okay? I grew up in Jerusalem, in a neighborhood called French Hill, funnily enough. I grew, and in front of that village, in the neighborhood, there was an Arab village. And I'm talking about 400 meters apart. Really, we grow up with two realities, and it always puzzled me. Of course, there was this reality changed. So before the Intifadas, we actually could go to that neighborhood, that village. But I was very puzzled. How can we live so close but be so apart? And that reality, my childhood reality, was an inspiration to create an installation that was inspired by a lot of post-colonialism thinking. Let me give you a little bit of politics, because I think everything should be political. Our reality in Israel, and as you can see, my interest in in-groups and out-groups, self and other, completely is let's call it, inspired and motivated by our complex reality with our neighbors. Now, the most complex part about this is that half of Israelis are actually a term that is quite controversial. I hope we're not offending anyone here, but they are Arab Jews. If you were born in Iraq, Syria, Egypt, speak Arabic, love Arab music, love Arab food, relate to the Arab culture, you are Jewish. Fantastic. Actually, they lived pretty in many quite let's call it in peace in the Arab countries, in some places. But your culture is Arab. So looking at the Israeli reality as Jews and Arabs puzzled me completely. And if you read the post-colonialism literature, Franz Fanon, Black Mask, White Faces, Edward Said, that was my inspiration. Again, I'm busy with self and other. So I took my reality as a child and built it in the museum. I took a 2 adjunct neighborhood and village. I didn't go to the French Hill, too complex. Sometimes also you need to remove yourself a little bit from a reality. So I went to a village called Husan and Beitar Elit. Meters away, ultra-religious neighborhood, very, and literally across kind of the border. And I reproduced the 2 families' living room in gallery space. I interviewed both families. So I was a guest in the Arab family for several weeks, and a guest in the family of the Arab Jew family. Came from Iraq, talked, very religious, but amazingly, they talked about the complexity, how they feel in many senses very close to Arab culture. Like completely puzzling, and I think it's one of the biggest silent narratives in our society. And I wanted to create a topical piece. This was 1 year, an entire year in the museum, over 15,000 visitors, kids, grown-ups, visiting an Arab living room, meeting them, putting the headset and actually listening to them and relating. I didn't run this as an empirical study, but I created a lot of discussions and meetings there. So this is Raji Sabatin and funnily enough David Avidan. This on the right side is their real homes, and this is on the left side how we reproduced their homes, their living rooms in the gallery, and we just had 6 headsets spread around. Very simple piece, but I wanted to make a point. And I had a lot of conversations on impact from both sides. I brought the Sabatin family to the museum, and there was many interesting stories and let's call it understandings out of what this actually created and the impact it had.
What I do not understand is what is the plus of the VR? What do you do here that you could not do just by taking a car and going to an Arabic village?
Better to take a car. I totally
You know what I mean? Like, what is the plus of the VR?
How many times have you been in a Palestinian house?
I don't know.
Probably if I take a sample here, we have 50 people here. How many of you have been in the last 5 years in a museum? Raise your hand. How many of you have been in a Palestinian house? Well done. The statistics show that the chances for you to experience, and that's what art is for. Because when I have an idea and I have to decide, is it an art piece, a scientific research, or a startup, I carefully choose, and I know what's the qualities of each route. But art is about paying attention. It's about taking other routes to impact.
Are you not afraid to have an awkward feeling if, for example, you are making friends with people via VR, and then when you meet them in real, you have nothing to say, or it's very strange?
I'll wrap my talk and with this good question. But as you can see, I gave you a little window into my. I didn't talk about my work in the industry and my company, but a little window to my scientific work and my artistic work about my philosophical take on reality and what could be maybe in a virtual one. And if you take my research of the checkpoint, you see that it does impact. In a controlled environment, I saw that people can actually, or experiencing my VR scenario, can impact attitudes. So I think that between scientific research and art project, it's a mode for me to respond to our complex reality. Our life is completely entangled in the physical world. Our lives are finite, our realities are physical. I think our attitude towards digital should be very critical. We need to not believe that the metaverse is going to solve the big problems. It can improve when done right, when done consciously, when done by the right people. It can have positive impact on the real world, but I think we have to be critical about the transition between the worlds and hope to create and design them in such a way, again, with positive outcomes as we believe. Thank you.
Are there any questions?
So the questions were already there. I saw this from there. Did you want to ask?
Yes, I was wondering, we were seeing that some children were using these masks for VR. I was wondering, first of all, like, what role do you think VR can play in the education of future children? And on the reverse, to what extent the self-construction of a child, for example, a baby discovering itself for the first time on a mirror, which is like very much studied in psychoanalysis and stuff, has inspired the VR? This is kind of general question.
So I take here two questions. One is VR for education. So my startup is an educational company. That's where we put a lot of effort. So I believe that VR can be very effective to modify and translate and disrupt how we learn. I'm starting with higher education. I don't like the idea of putting VR on younger kids, just for various reasons. But I think eventually, in the right amount and the right situations, it can have a lot of positive impact. And we're talking about undivided attention, it's more engaging, it's learning from experience, because it's almost like being in the market or in an oil rig or in the safari. So it could leave a strong impact, and I think that could, when constructed well as pedagogical with pedagogical objectives, it could be very powerful learning tool. So that's my take, and again, that's what my company does. And your second question, what was it about kids and kind of the self-awareness? So it's a bit broad question. Overall, I don't think that VR is suitable for younger kids, and definitely not for virtual embodiment. I think the body, I have a 14-year-old, and every 2 months he's changing. So that's virtually, he's embodying himself every 2 weeks into another body. I wouldn't want to interfere with that. It's crazy enough. I have 2 teenagers at home. Let's let them build their identity before we start, extending it. Yeah.
Some after research with the people that we measured that VR changed their
attitude.
Because the question is
long-term effect.
I can also cry when I see a movie.
Yes.
But we go out, we go to the restaurant, we drink beer, we eat, and we speak about the film. But with the change that you noticed in the VR experience, is there a real impregnation that the guy who hurt his wife or wives in general will stop really? Did you study this maybe?
So, yeah, no, it's a fantastic question. It's when we are talking about VR as kind of societal impact and personal impact, the question of long-term effect is very, very good one. I didn't study it, but it's well studied. And there's a lot of research showing that it can, in some conditions, have long-term effects.
So you can really
change modify behavior. Yeah. Think about it. Why don't you all think about kind of a transformative experience? Can you take a little moment to think about a person, an interaction, a place, a situation, a moment that changed your life? Don't tell it, I'm not going to ask, it's not a trick question. Just think about it just for a second, for every one of you. Some of us, not all, some of us younger, some of us older, some of us not yet, but I think many of us can remember meeting a person, going a place, looking at the ceiling and something coming up, taking a shower and then an idea coming, but that had a transformative quality. And again, I believe that that's what art can induce. Life, traveling. So why not VR? Because we create experiences. Again, with a lot of humility. I'm saying I don't think that I'll create a transformative experience every time. But if we carefully construct in the research lab, in the gallery, and with some intention, we might impact someone's life and change it for long term.